Great. Once again, I want to welcome everyone tonight. I'm Avril Williams. I am the head of marketing for Backyard ADUs. If you haven't attended one of these before, I'm the face behind doing all the emails that you receive and social media, and then have been working alongside Tim, who's with us tonight, to do our events. And tonight we're doing the last part of our series on the Massachusetts Affordable Homes Act. Kind of a Q&A session. And just a few things before we get started. Like I said, we are recording, so that will be available 1 week from tonight on our YouTube channel. If you go to there may be several times that we reference a past event, particularly in the series that I might refer to, and all of those recordings are on our YouTube channel for you to visit and rewatch if you have specific questions. Also, we've disabled the chat tonight, just to make it easy to know where questions are coming in, rather than juggling both. So you can use that Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen. We just ask that you use it specifically for questions, trying not to use it as a place just to make comments. And as those come in, whenever it's an appropriate time to interject, I will be asking questions on your behalf. And then at the end, if we have a bunch of questions left over, then we'll just kind of bang them out real quick. Again, Mike is with us and he has a hard stop at 5:40, so we want to take advantage of his time and get as much information from it as possible. So I'll turn it over to Tim, who can introduce himself and a little more about Mike as well.
Great. I'm Tim O'Reilly. I'm the director of pre-construction. So I'm doing all things related to building houses and ADUs with our team here at Backyard ADUs. And I was lucky enough to meet Mike several months ago as we're here in sort of the Wild West on the East Coast. So the rules are changing. Michael is a real estate attorney with over 23 years of experience doing residential and commercial projects, approaching it with a team-based approach, dealing with complex problems. And Michael, you're licensed in Mass, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Florida. And you have offices all over New England, and you're local to that Metro West area.
Yeah,
Is that right?
that's
Perfect.
right.
So Michael and I again, so lucky to meet you. We get questions all the time. Our phone is always ringing. People are emailing us. What the heck is going on with the Affordable Homes Act? And we've been tracking it since the governor signed it in August to its enactment in February. And here we are sort of, almost 6 to 8 weeks later. And I'm really excited tonight to sort of dive in with you to say, hey, what are we seeing? Because I know you're all over the state. We are as well. And the phone is ringing, people are emailing. What the heck's going on?
Yeah, it's exciting because the towns are coming up to town meeting season. So over the next few months, towns are going to be adopting their own bylaw regulations. So each town within the Commonwealth, I think there's 351 towns, they are going to do one of two things. They're just going to use the state's bylaws on this as a default. And then the alternative, like my town of Southborough, what they're doing is they've drafted their own bylaws that are going to go to town meeting. And then the townspeople will then either accept, amend, approve, reject those town meeting minutes and amendments, and then we will have a new set of bylaws to go with. So
we're permitting one right now next door in Northborough.
Time. What's that?
Very active. We're permitting one right now in Northborough, where the town hasn't yet gotten there, and we're rolling with the state rules, and we're going to see how it goes. So for tonight, let's hop into our slides, Michael. You bring a wealth of knowledge. We're sort of out in the field, boots on the ground. Let's skim through it, high level, 10 to 15 minutes. Folks in the audience, please stop us as we go. Your questions are really valuable. And then we'll leave some time at the end there for all the new ideas and thoughts that'll come up. So we know we're here about ADUs. These are the rules that have changed. Here at Backyard ADUs, our lens is always towards this housing crisis. How can we build more houses to help folks be housed and to have stronger, more robust communities? We know that the trend in building is to build bigger, bigger, bigger. But here we are where that's left us in a gap. So we build all sorts of ADUs, detached, attached, with a garage, in a tight city lot, in a more rural environment. They take on a lot of different shapes and forms. And Michael, maybe you could just shed, with your 23 years plus experience, why is this moment important? Like, what has the Affordable Homes Act really done here?
So again, like I've been doing this a while. This is the biggest top bottom zoning change in my career. What happened is Massachusetts is a home rule state. So what that means is each town and community typically gets to create their own bylaws, rules, regulations about the layout of the town and how things are implemented. And what the state has done is it has circumvented the towns. And it's, if you're familiar with that, Massachusetts, you may have heard of what's called a 40B, which is an affordable housing project. They have curtailed the laws so that people who are in a single family zoned district can add an accessory dwelling unit by right. So previously you would need regulatory approval from the towns, typically the zoning board of appeals in that town, and that now is no longer the case. You're still going to need a building permit. You're still going to have some what's called site plan review from the town's planning boards, but you don't have to notify your abutters. You don't need to beg for permission, and you're going to be allowed to build what's called a permitted or protected use ADU, which is 900 square feet and under by right. And so it's going to trump all of these towns' zoning and rule-based regulations. And that's a really big deal.
One of our early cautionary tales here at Backyard ADUs is that, again, each town had their own rules. The town said, hey, you got to come in front of the ZBA and present it. You do all this work up front, you design the house, get the site plan, do some pricing, figure out what it's going to cost. We took that to the ZBA. The neighbors got up in arms, everyone was angry, and they shot the project down. And that's exactly it, Michael, is to say, hey, that roadblock, that hurdle is gone, which is
That's
going to mean
exactly
that.
right. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what people did. I don't want people renting this. I don't want to have this. And so what's happened is those restrictions are now gone. Now you just, here's your building permit, you go to site plan review and it gets built, as opposed to airing your laundry and letting everyone tear into you.
And something that I'm loving too about this is it's leveling the playing field, especially when it comes to the terminology. We used to read bylaws all the time, and this town calls it an accessory apartment, and they call it a granny flat. You call it a garden cottage. Now we're all on the same page. It's
ADU.
always a mouthful. ADU, accessory dwelling unit. It's a bit technical. It's always a pain in the butt when I have to write it on my email or spell
Right?
it out to somebody.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel your pain.
Yes. But we're all there. So common terminology is going to help, disseminate that message a little bit further, clear up some confusion. I get this a lot, Michael. Like, is it changed my zoning? I have two family. I have 2 units.
The
How is that
key,
looked at?
as a lawyer, I live and die by words. So if you have a single family and you add an ADU, it is now not legally a two-family. It is not. It is a single family home with an ADU. And so it's just important to have the definitions and terms correctly. So when that homeowner goes to sell the house, they don't have a two-family, even though they're getting 2 rental incomes. That's where the investors really like this, is because if you have a property that's situated for such, you can add an ADU and rent out both units. And so now you're getting 2 income streams as opposed to just one. But when you go to sell it, it's a single family home with an ADU. And so
Most of the folks we're building for are doing like an aging in place scenario.
That's right.
But it's always
Aging in
important to
place or
keep that.
boomerang kids. That's exactly it.
Yep. But having that rental conversation is important too, to know, hey, what's
When
maybe my
Aunt
plan
Ginny
B, or
dies, you can rent that out. Let's go.
yeah. And again, hey, if you do it now, we're tackling that housing
Yeah,
crisis.
sorry to any
The
Aunt
units
Ginny's
are
on the
there.
call, but that was my former backyard shed. That's my son Benjamin.
Tell us the story. So I know you've
So
built an ADU in your yard.
yeah, I built an ADU in my yard. That was the pre-existing non-conforming structure we lovingly called the meth lab. Um, And what I did is, since that was a pre-existing structure, the only reason literally that it is standing is there's those 4 ash trees that were holding it up that had grown up around it. And I had to build, and in the presentation, there'll be some photos of it that I can point out. And I built an accessory dwelling unit in the backyard. And so just as I add that in from just a, hey, listen, it can be done, you can do it, and it's really cool.
It's great. And your experience too, I forgot to mention this in your intro. You've also been a zoning board member in
Yeah,
your town.
I am a zoning board member
Are you
now. I'm
currently?
literally, I don't like our town's final draft. I got them yesterday, so I'm having very polite disagreements with the head of the planning board of appeals. So
I'm excited to get some more details about that after. One thing we would run into a lot is the ways in which town used to try to block these, and one
yeah.
was a deed restriction. So could you tell us how the landscape
And this
shifted?
is really important for those of us who may have built an ADU previously. The towns, what they would do is they would say, hey, listen, this is for non-rental only. This is for family only. And I've seen towns that I use Aunt Ginny. This is for Aunt Ginny's lifetime. Upon Aunt Ginny's death or vacancy of the house, this space is no longer a legal space. Those deed restrictions that were previously put into place, and again, it gets a little complicated, and I can help any of the people on the call if it gets funky. But from a very brief perspective, those deed restrictions are now no longer legally enforceable, and towns are forbidden for putting on deed restrictions to protected use ADUs.
We built for folks in Abington, and at the time, under that town's bylaw, it had to be for family only, and they had to de-restrict, and it was for his 93-year-old mother, which it's great. It brought the family together.
You should follow up with them and let them know that that deed restriction should no longer be legally enforceable. And then I would ask the town to see what they're going to do in having that removed. Question mark.
Yeah, and that was one of our pre submitted questions. Was like, hey, what if I sort of had one of these units already? How is that going to work interfacing with the town now that the regulations are in place?
And the great thing is no one knows. Everyone's figuring this out together. Everyone's at the exact same starting point. We're going to just take it at a case by case, and we're going to figure this out, because I can tell you the building commissioner doesn't know, because the town commissioners don't know, because nobody knows. So we'll figure it out.
Yeah, and so that sort of chain of command. This started at that state level. The governor signed it in August, and it was enacted. Was it February 2nd?
Yeah, I think February 6th.
February 6th, early February. And so now that's put the onus on the towns
to change the
and what
bylaws.
to change the bylaw. So maybe you could use your town right now as an example,
Sure.
just to provide some color commentary of what's happening right now in a lot of those towns. Like,
So
how do those rules change?
So the biggest rule is, again, the requirement for a special permit. So what we did is we amended our bylaws to remove that requirement. And then what we did is we changed the definition, because Southborough had a different definition than ADU. So we are using the state's definition. And then what we do is we go through what is considered to be a protected use ADU. And so we kind of qualify what fits into that compartment. And if it doesn't fit, then you're going to go back to essentially the old way of doing things, where, and for all the people on the call, a protected use ADU, if it's under 900 square foot, that's just the easiest baseline, or 50% of the gross living area. It's either going to fit into the protected use ADU and you're going to be exempt from special permit, or let's say you go, that's just too small and I want a 1,500 square foot, you're just going to go back to the way it was. So you would then go to zoning, you'd go be denied from the building department. You would then appeal that, you would notify your neighbors and have that class. And so it's that, not class, that
Clash, potentially.
that public hearing that to be discussed. And so there's just 2 paths that this is going to go. It's either going to fit into this space or it won't.
So great. That's really helpful. And it's like right now, internally, the town is talking about that. The zoning board is reviewing it. before and is it a town meeting town? Is it going to go to
It
town
is.
meeting and
For
get
us, it's a
voted
town
on?
meeting.
And so that's a good point, is some towns, they need to slot this into town meeting, have it be voted on, and then would it still go to the attorney general to get reviewed for
I think it will be, but no one cares about that.
yeah, right. It's like, hey,
Big,
we've
big,
stamped off. Yeah.
unless they're doing
Signed off.
something nuts and somebody appeals and makes an issue, which people do, but frauds, big picture, yeah, no.
Yeah, we'll do all right. Owner occupancy is another one we would see a lot. That
That's the
towns would come in
biggest.
and
That is the
yeah.
biggest change across the board, is removing owner occupancy requirements. That was Tim, that was the 100, that's the biggest change across the board. You could pretty much almost always get that granny flat, that assisted living home. But if you wanted to rent this place out, if you had an investment property, that was the bar, that was the restriction. That's the biggest bar that's been removed, without a doubt.
And it, similar to that family in Abington, it's, hey, what's my plan B, C, and D? If they couldn't rent it out, hey, they're investing a lot of more money in their
That's
property
just it.
without
Now,
to be shackled a little bit.
that's just it. And again, like if I was buying a home for the first time, or if I had younger kids, let's say my son who's 13, let's say he's 23 and he's out of college and they can't afford to enter into this housing market, and I can have him move into my ADU and save that money to build, hey, let's build a savings account for you to then enter the market. It just provides more flexibility. ADUs are an old idea. This is not new. The new is the changing of the law, removing of the restrictions.
Parking's one we've dealt with a lot. There's
Big time. That
really
is still the biggest issue.
yeah, and we've also seen, there is some nuance there. We've dealt with projects where, hey, maybe we're counting spaces that are already existing in garages, spaces that are turnarounds can also count. Maybe we're converting what is grass to base prep material. It now counts as a parking spot. As we get into our more urban environments where we're not within that half a mile of transportation, it's a little bit harder. But what's really nice now is the town can't slap on, hey, you need 2 spaces, which is a huge footprint. They'd only limit to 1 if they come and layer that in. Other ones, let's talk about these a little bit. What were some other barriers that towns used to put in that now have sort of melted away here when it comes to density and unit caps?
Well, again, it's not going to contribute towards the density. And that's again kind of going along with single family home versus ADU. And so what's going to happen is they can't put limits on that. And so they're only allowed 1 permitted protected use ADU per property. So if they wanted a second ADU, they'd have to go get a special permit for it. But for the one that they're allowed, they can't put restrictions on caps.
That's a question I get a lot is, hey, does this work on 2-family or multifamily zoning?
No.
What are you seeing?
100% no. It's like very, very seldomly do attorneys get to say no unequivocally. But that's a pretty easy no unequivocally. So
I have seen a couple towns.
This is only for single family. It opens the door for, let's say you have a 2-family with an illegal basement unit. I think the towns are going to be one of the background reasons for the law is to get those illegal units out of the shadows, make them safe, get that second point of egress, get smoke prevention in, and let's stop kidding around. We know this is a 3-family. Let's give them an ADU, but it won't be protected. You'll have to get a special permit for that.
I'm curious. I've seen a couple towns where in old bylaws before the Affordable Homes Act said, hey, you can do a 2-family, you can do an ADU on a 2-family, and I'll be curious to see if maybe they write some of that out. So, hey, the state very clearly says it's single family only, and how that might change.
Yeah, I always feel like towns that have those type of bylaws are going to be the same ones that aren't going to update their ones.
Right. And this is again, I'm thinking of East Hampton, Massachusetts. They already allowed 800 square feet by right,
By
no owner
right.
occupancy, the parking, et
Yeah,
cetera.
some
So
towns are
yeah.
really on board with this. Other snobby towns are just not going to be.
And that's the battle we're already seeing. And we have some slides later to talk about that.
Perfect.
I think this is going to be the one where towns maybe dig their heels in. Like this idea of what's considered unreasonable, because in that state rule, they're saying, hey, you can use towns can come in and layer in certain things, but it has to be in the realm of reasonable. So what do you, from your legal perspective, Mike, how talking about language, how do you see this playing out?
You know, the biggest thing for considered unreasonable, like what they just don't want, and again, that's my accessory dwelling unit that I got built from the previous meth lab, for those of you on the call. Basically, like the unreasonable regulations that the state has said that towns can't do. One of the biggest ones that's super important is they can't require additional water and sewer line connection fees. And so that's one of the biggest ones, because sometimes that's like $5,000 if you want to add sometimes you might need a separate line, and that's a different story. But let's just say you're building a attached ADU. So you're you're doing a bump out in the house, you're doing an attic, you're doing a basement. You're not going to be required to pay for an extra tie-in line. And, you know, that's considered unreasonable. Southborough, for example, one of the earlier drafts was they were going to say, okay, no detached in the front yards. No, that's unreasonable. No ADUs over 2 stories. No, the law is really clear. They have to follow the same building codes for single family in that district. In Southborough, it's 2.5 stories. So that 2-story restriction was considered unreasonable. The design standard, so for people on the call, the way this is going to work, let's say it's a protected use. This is always just for protected use. You're going to work with Tim. You're going to have a plan. You're going to go to the building commissioner. Building commissioner is going to say, yes, but you need to go to planning for site plan review. And what they want, especially for detached units, they're going to want design standards that are consistent with that house, with the neighborhood. What they don't want is some hideous salt box on the front yard with parking that's like on the front yard, and everybody else's house is like this really nice colonial. Like it's just going to be an eyesore. And that's where the site plan approval from the planning boards is going to come into effect. And so there has to be some harmony from a design standpoint. You know, Aunt Ginny can't just have some crazy Key West style cottage in the front yard. Like that's just not
We're
going to
not
fit.
building the glass box
There it
in the
is.
New England neighborhood. Yes. And that's such a key point, that what we're vetting early on is, hey, what are these standards in this district?
That's right.
Because you still got to follow the rules, right?
These
Those are sort of that's the
the
board.
dimensional standards are key. So I was able to build my structure because it was a pre-existing structure. If that had fallen down or I tore it down, I could not build where I built it because it was within both the rear and the side setbacks. And so what happens is they have to be dimensionally accurate. It has to be, again, more for either for detached. You know, a bump out might go into the side setback, for example. But if you go into the setback, you're going to need a variance. And that's a different set of legal tasks that need to get done. I'm doing a variance for a client on a build out in Ashland right now.
Let's dive right in there. I know your time is valuable. You got a hard cutoff, but we get asked that all the time. And it's like, well, maybe, my lot doesn't fit. Like, how do you look at variances? We often say, hey, consult the legal professional. We
Okay, you
can
got a
design
legal
it,
professional
permit,
on a
build it.
call right now that deals
Yeah.
with variances every single month. So a variance, so zoning boards of appeals broadly, we deal with 2 primary issues, what are called special permits and what are called variances. And a variance is a change to the existing zoning bylaws for that district. So let's just say you're in what's called R1 and R10 and R40 residential district of your town. And within your lot, if you can just envision a square lot, it'll say your rear setback is 30 feet, your side setbacks are 15 feet. And what that is, these are invisible lines that go around the existing structure or proposed structure that says you cannot build within those rear, side, and front setbacks. What towns didn't want is they didn't want, I'm originally from Newport, Rhode Island, and you will have a lot and 100% of the lot is covered by a house. And so there's literally, forget a yard, there it's house to house, cheek to jowl. And towns, residential towns don't want that. And as a result, they pass zoning laws that say, hey, listen, we don't want all the site coverage, so you can't build within the setback. If you want to build within a setback, then you put in a petition to the town to build there. The building commissioner of the town is going to deny that permit, and then you can appeal that denial. And then you would go in front of the zoning board of appeals to see if you're eligible for a denial, a relief from that denial. And that's what I do, is I hear people, I'm wanting to add a car garage to my lot. It's on my side setback. Can I do this? Every town is very different. Variances are not easy to get. They're a harder legal standard. You don't have a legal right to change the zoning. And as a result, you just have to, there's some strict guidance that you're going to need assistance with. And then what happens is, for me, it's my belief, if it fits and it makes sense and the neighbors don't care, and as long as it's consistent in harmony, I usually don't have objections with it. But a lot of people will lie and try to BS. And then the neighbor, like I had one with the garage, and 3 neighbors showed up and are like, we're absolutely dead set against this. It's hard for me to give permission when all of your neighbors are up in arms about it.
That's where it's back in that realm of you're in front of the board. You have to have that sort of,
And you can't get
backing
around
there.
that. You can't get around
Yeah.
that. Oh, there's Ben again.
Yeah, Ben and the ADU well underway.
I have a question
Great.
relating to utilities. It says towns with specific septic systems, will there be parameters for expanding existing septic systems to correct bedroom count?
Whoever asked that question, that is the question to ask. And that's going to be town to town. And that's going to be based upon your Board of Health. And so a lot of towns are going to follow the adage. So let's just say Tim wants to add a bedroom to his house. Forget an ADU. I'm adding a bedroom to your house and you're on septic. You would just typically, the town is going to say you're going to have to update your septic tank and leaching field. Most cases. And so essentially an ADU is doing the exact same thing. So they're treating the homeowners the same way. So whether you just want to add a bedroom to a house or an ADU, you're adding a bedroom. Many towns will allow you, and again, I'll use myself as an example. We have a bedroom at the front of our house that we use as an office. We really genuinely don't use it as a bedroom. And so that's my ADU in the backyard right there. And what happens is that's a bedroom now. So we borrowed that bedroom from the house because it really wasn't, and that's okay. Some towns will let you do that. Some towns will not. Some towns will say, hey, listen, your septic tank is sufficient, but you need to add a leaching field, assuming you have space to add a leaching line. And so you would change your distribution box and you would run an additional leaching line. Others are going to be very strict and say, nope, you need to replace your whole system.
And that's stuff we look at as part of that feasibility. Hey, what is
That's
in the
going to be
ground?
the
What are the
most
records we have?
expensive. It's going to be the
Yes.
most expensive single piece of cost for any ADU.
And we'll sort of look and tier that. So, hey,
Yeah.
where's the low hanging fruit of the bedroom conversion? Do we need another tank? Do we need to expand the leach? Do we need to think about a new
And
system?
sometimes you've got an old system that probably could use to be replaced anyways. Some systems are newer, but if you've got a 30, 40-year-old system, and you're going to be there for a while, like it's either now or later to a certain degree.
I was out on site out in Deerfield, Massachusetts this
I know
week,
it well.
and it's to say, hey, your septic was installed in 1991. your kids have moved on. There's only two of you in the house. It's probably going to continue to be fine for a while. But if you're going to build an ADU, now is your yard's going to get torn up. There's going to be a lot of construction. The price tag is hard to swallow, but functionality, if you have a brand new system in the ground, you're not going to have to worry about it. In her case, the rest of her life.
That's it.
So
It's something to
yeah.
think about. It's a math problem to a certain degree.
That was a great question. Any more out there, Averill? I'm cognizant Mike has to leave right at 5:40.
Yeah, we have a cost question, so I was saving that for the end once Mike has to leave. Just about price per square foot, but we can tackle that later if you want to keep going.
Yeah, let's just dive in real quick of the things the towns can come in and layer on. Because this, you were saying, hey, it's open season now for all these things, but towns can still come in. They can add rental restrictions. So we're seeing this a lot on the Cape, where they're
Big
wary
time.
of
Even
Airbnbs.
Southborough is a rental restriction, so not a coastal community. Ours is going to be 31 days.
Okay, great. So that is something you'll still see your local town coming in, layering in. We just talked through the Title V stuff, right? They hold the line. You have to follow these state rules. There's ways to navigate that, which we just talked about. And then parking, right? Hey, they're still going to come in and say, hey, you got to carve off a space. Maybe there's already a spot on paper or on pavement that counts, or maybe we got to make a new one. Getting into cost, hey,
Just if I can, Tim, on parking.
Mm-hmm.
So for certain towns like Southborough, at first they were like, we don't want tandem parking. And then at the meeting I go, well, if you say no to tandem parking, one, it's discriminatory on its face. Like, I think there's a legal challenge to that. And I go, second, that means curb cuts, asphalt, and/or parking on the lawn. Oh no, we don't want that. We want tandem parking spaces. And I'm like, exactly.
And that's where you got it's there's still some semantics there. And then also, like, what do they have on their books? A lot of towns, especially more urban towns that are more progressive with planning, some of those parking bylaws, that's 5 to 10 pages, and if this then that, and if that then this.
And
so
literally, like, there's parking requirements, but let's say your house doesn't even have parking for you. Like, that's where the towns are really going bananas. Like, the urban districts that don't have parking. Like, if you live in Southie, South Boston's its own separate animal.
Yeah, it's on
it's on its own thing. But like, for example, like, you're gonna have a street sign through your window if you park in somebody else's spot. Like, there's no extra parking to have.
And that's, I think politically they layered in, half a mile from public transit, erase that. So many towns, right, just not viable. So
it's just not viable. So
yeah. Well, we're obviously biased here at Backyard ADUs. We think they're a great form of housing. We see the housing crisis. Averill, I'll come back to costs after Mike's off.
Yeah, we do have another question too. For the town of Barnstable on the Cape, there's also no short-term rental restriction. Who do we speak to about that? I was looking to rent our future ADU to travel nurses, medical staff that stay here for a minimum of 13 weeks.
They should reach out to me, or go ahead, Mike.
No, go ahead.
Mike said reach out to me.
Well, we have I rent a house in Barnstable. It's actually an ADU. So I'm really well versed in the specific rules there.
Go with that.
Well, my contact information will be there. So I'd be happy to chat about that.
Yeah, and for someone who's built an ADU as well, like, so not only am I a lawyer and zoning and planning and dealing with, I've done it. Like,
utility trench, that was something else.
So get this, for everybody on the call, make sure you keep your goddamn permits, because guess what? When I built this, so I pulled permits for everything, building permits, structural, insulation. I went to check my town records like 3 years later, they had nothing. And they go, well, we don't have any proof that the electrical inspection. I have another photo other than this with Jim, the electrical inspector. He's like partly in the frame. And I'm like, Jim is right there. He was inspecting this. So keep your goddamn permits, because they're the most important thing that you don't know. but it's just one of those things that like, you can do this, it can be done. Like I have a really small house in Southborough. It's only 1,500 square foot. And I knew that that barn was going to fall down. And I always say, I go, I'm not a tool guy, I'm not a tool guy, but what we really needed was some additional space. And that's a place for my kids to go and hang out in when they're teenagers. And, that's just a way to get out of the house and relax. And so that's why we did what we did. And unknowingly, it all kind of came together with this law.
Great. That's really where the rubber meets the road. So in your last minute here, Mike, looking into your crystal ball, hey, my town may not be updating their rules. Like, what's it going to look like in the next 6 months?
It's going to be just, you can go, and again, I'm always happy to help, but these regulations are, if you just Google Massachusetts ADU laws, the Massachusetts Attorney General will have the regulations right there. And in the absence of regulations from the town, you can use the state regs. But the problem with all of this is, Tim knows firsthand, the building commissioner in each town is its own czar. They are the big kahuna. And so you can have the law on your side and you can have all the best arguments, and they're still going to be the ones who get to like approve or reject projects. So you really can't go in there like heavy handed, so to speak. You have to work with the system that is.
And that's where we are every day. Is it's still that personal relationship with the folks in the office, the building commissioner, and even down to, hey, your electrical inspector and plumbing inspector, and making it all happen. So Mike, I know you have to run. Thank you so much for your time, your insights,
For
and your
anybody who's
expertise.
interested on this, I love answering questions and helping people. This
Your
is just
contact
breakfast. This is
information.
just breakfast, lunch, and dinner for me. That's my wife in that photo, for the record. But no, this is all I do is real estate. I love what I do. I love helping people. My job is to be a resource and an advocate for people. So a lot of times there's questions and issues, and that's what my job is, to help homeowners just like yourselves.
And that's our goal and mission here at Backyard ADs, is to help people navigate this process. So Mike, thanks again for coming tonight
Great to
and
see you,
being an
Tim.
expert. Yeah,
Have a
good to see
nice
you. I'll see you
Thank
soon.
you, Mike.
Absolutely.
Appreciate
Have a
you.
great night. Reach out to anyone, anytime.
Thanks, Mike.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
So April, I'll circle back to costs here.
Yeah.
And this is, the stuff where we're seeing, what's really going on out there. These are big projects. There are some hurdles along the way that can be overcome, but ADUs are still the cheapest form of housing, especially here in Massachusetts. When you're looking at the cost to build a new single family, this number here for new apartments, we heard it was floated around $600,000 per unit. And we heard that number iterated with some local nonprofits who are building housing, which was astounding. It's astronomical. So ADUs aren't cheap. Costs have gone up a fair bit, especially over the past couple of years with all of the headwinds that we've had. But still, to get into a new ADU is cheaper than any other form of housing. Other frequently asked questions we get a lot here at Backyard ADUs is about, other nitpicky rules or things that might be out there. Are there traps, laying in the grass, and HOAs is one. How does a set of covenants or rules cue in? Hey, the state level has come in. Your local folks can make some modifications, but have to stick to the core principles. But an HOA, those rules governing those properties will still be in effect. The question, though, really is, will the municipality enforce them? What we've seen, this was a project, maybe I shouldn't say where, but it was from the 80s. These were some covenants that had some particular things about a project we were working on. It turns out to say, hey, new rules, new things happening. But the town may also just defer and say, hey, we won't grant you this permit until those covenants are reviewed to make sure that it matches before we'll sign off and stamp it. So it really still is a case-by-case basis on this front. The lay of the land here, when Mike was talking, hey, it is a protected by right ADU, is going to be by right going to the building department and pulling a permit. We still have to do our homework. We have to bring in the correct professionals and our team. That's often a professional land surveyor, not always. It is municipality dependent. A stamped set of building plans. As we're in more urban areas, you're often required to do stormwater, either a stamped engineer set or a dry well or things like that, rain gardens to offset, the new impervious surface that we're adding. Title V, we talked about, we still got to meet all those regs. And then being in Massachusetts, if you are within 100 to 200 feet of, a wetland or riverfront, there's a lot of stuff we got to do. So you cannot circumnavigate any of those rules. We still have to follow them.
Have you seen any of the model bylaw that they just released? It was a couple weeks ago. I don't know if you'd read over any of that or had any thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the model bylaw in the building sphere, there's also sort of like model set approved plans. All these towns, again, 300 and some odd towns have to come into compliance. So the model bylaw is great to say, hey, here's sort of a starting point for towns to jump off of. I haven't read the one that was recently published. The only sticking point there, I mean, the reason zoning has gotten where it is everyone just sort of copies each other. Why do we need 250 parking spaces at a Target shopping center? Is because these just, things have gotten copied over and over. So I haven't read those specifically, but in theory, it helps towns that really don't have as much of the resources or personnel to come into compliance to have a template to work off of.
Okay, yeah. I was like, come on, you didn't read it. I wanted you to save me the
Well, now I'll have to read it. I'll add it to my reading list.
Okay.
Are there any questions or things coming out of the crowd? I could sit here and spew.
Well, just that last question, and we are rolling up towards the end. We have about 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes. If you have any questions, now is the time to dump those in the chat, in the Q&A box rather, so we can make sure your specific questions get answered. And then I guess, I don't know how much more you have of your slides, but we could go over cost stuff too.
I can go for another hour, but this is a key point. Mike is on the zoning board. Now, hey, these projects don't go to the zoning board, but the town could still come and require a site plan review. Northampton, Massachusetts still requires this. Other towns still do. We have to go and present our project. It's typically just a rubber stamping. It's not that ZBA hearing where the neighbors could still show up, but it is ultimately the board interpreting their rules and the project to say, hey, we're in compliance. Timing wise, it adds a couple months. It adds a little bit in cost. There's fees to do it plus professional time to prepare and present. And then there is often an appeal period and you have to file a bunch of paperwork. So it can add 2 to 3 months to a project. So, monetary, but time implications. We've covered a lot of stuff. Mike is a really great asset. We also defer to real estate attorneys when we talk about a question we generally get is, hey, can I build one of these in my friend's backyard? Or how does that work? Actually, that property I was at in Deerfield was just that. It was to say, hey, my friend wants to build an ADU on my property. Great. The zoning allows for it. Let's look at the utilities. She had, hey, we got to make sure we're in Title V compliance. Where's the power pole? We got to still get the surveyor involved, do our engineered stamp plan, everything to do that by right process. But the other question she needs to start asking now is how is this going to work? And, legally, this agreement between me and my friend, they are building this thing on my property, investing money and adding value. How do we navigate this? So that's another one where bringing an attorney in, or at least starting to have those conversations early, is helpful to have this come to fruition. One of our first projects on Cape Cod was exactly that scenario where a friend built in her college friend's backyard, and she's now retired to Cape Cod. And then oftentimes, even if, hey, mom is aging in place and moving into the backyard, how does that work in terms of the estate and planning? Those are questions to talk about and think about early.
We have questions coming in.
Great.
So, Can an ADU be a tiny house?
Great question. Let's go back. I pulled in specifically a photo of a tiny house. So when you hear tiny house, we're often calling ourselves back here to these small homes to distinguish from the typical tiny house like this photo here, a tiny house on wheels. Those are different. We are governed under building code as a dwelling, whereas a tiny house is on a trailer. It's mobile. It is not viewed the same and governed the same. So as part of the as a different part, the seasonal communities designation, some towns in Massachusetts are going to now be required to adopt tiny house code, which is a separate set of code than what we're dealing with, typical building code. Other towns, maybe they're not in that seasonal community area, may have it, or a lot of towns, honestly, don't allow it. So it is a question to go in, check your local zoning to say, hey, is this something allowed? Typically, one of the barriers is still wastewater in Title V. How are you going to dispose of your gray water and your black water? Even if it is allowed zoning wise, you may need to have some of the same infrastructure that you would for a full on dwelling. Yeah. And that's where I'm sort of glad the syntax here of the Affordable Homes Act. Hey, we're all going to call it an ADU, and we're going to know that it is following building code. It could be attached, detached, garage conversion, attic conversion, but that is separate from the tiny house on wheels designation.
Is there
What
a
else?
checklist of steps that you need to take from start to finish when building an ADU? If so, where can we find it?
Yes. So there are a lot of steps along the way. And each property, each situation, why are you building this is different. Backyard ADUs, we take a holistic approach. We're trying to start by looking at the 60,000 foot view to identify any potential hurdles, get ahead of those at lower financial barriers to entry to help people move through. So I don't have a physical checklist, but you should reach out to our info account and we'll be able to help basically do an initial consult at that 60,000 foot view. What are the local rules in your zoning district? What's going on with your property? I was actually looking at one of these today, and it's great. Your town allows it. These are your setbacks that we have to follow. Let's look at there's a pool. There's a pool in the backyard, and you're on a septic. So let's start looking at that stuff before you start, spinning the wheels on, survey, design, etc. So that's our best way to help you get started is to do that zoning research. Other than that, go ahead.
Because we did with Sam and Jeff, we did that how to build an ADU step by step event, and so I just put the recording link in the chat that you should be able to copy and paste, and that'll also bring you to YouTube to see all the other videos too.
And that's it. Go watch that hour. That is walking you through our process, and I would take that as a checklist. You don't have to do it with backyard ADUs, but it's how do you take this approach where I'm starting at the top of the funnel and working my way down, and then not getting ahead of yourself in steps or making a wrong turn where you start spending money or time and energy on something where I now have to go back and address something else ahead of time. Great question.
And Mike addressed this one earlier, but could you just repeat, can an ADU be 2-story or 2.5 story?
Yep. So we need to follow the dimensional requirements in your town, but also on your property for whichever zoning districts it is in. So it will vary. We'd be happy to look up that information for you. And it will depend on what are the rules in your zoning district. Whether you can go, how high you can go. Is it 30 feet? Is it 35 feet? Is it 2 stories? Is it 2.5 stories? From a rules perspective. And then of course there's like, hey, I put my hard hat on. What is here on site? Will this work? We're often building for aging in place. So 2 stories, it's often a non-starter. But we have built a lot of 2-story units that have turned out beautifully. So it can be done.
I'm now going to go towards the cost question, but this is something worth explaining. My question is related to cost per square foot. I feel as if some builders or contractors are or will use the new ADU law to continue to charge very high rates when it comes to cost per square foot for ADUs, as was done for normal sized homes built. I always thought the reason to have an ADU is that the cost per square foot would be much less than the cost per square foot for a standalone home. If I'm paying $400 plus per square foot for a 2,000 square foot home, and then paying the same price per square foot for a 400 square foot ADU, how is this cheaper for owners who want to build to provide reasonably priced housing?
Absolutely, absolutely, and this is where again we need to take that 60,000 foot approach, looking down. Why does the 400 square foot ADU cost the same price per square foot as the 2,000 square foot house? I didn't include it in here, but we have a great slide where we break down. Hey, we have a total budget. What percentage is site work and utilities? What percentage is the fees you pay your architects and engineers and designers? What's the cost of the actual house? What's the cost of landscaping, permitting? So whether we're building 2,000 square feet or that accessory dwelling unit, we need to meet building code. So we need to have all our utilities: power, water, septic, and sewer. So if I'm building a new ADU, and let's say I'm on town sewer, for example, I still have to, connect that. If I'm building an ADU and I need water, I got to go connect to the house, connect to the street, or maybe even drill a new well. Power, I need, 100 to 200 amps. Typically, we're doing a new service. You actually see one here in this image. We're often still going to the street to get a brand new electrical service. So that base cost, not inclusive of the house, not inclusive of the permitting and fees. What is the work we need to do in order to build this? May be the same. So, and then the other point there is, how much site work and utilities. Let's go back to Mike's photo. Mike's ADU. I didn't want to press him on it. He had his electrical trench all the way to the back. Hey, his ADU is all the way in the back. He can do this, etc. This is a very expensive electrical run. It's underground. There's all the conduit. There's all the digging. And then there's all the wire, which is expensive. So case by case, where is the ADU? What is the base we need to do in order to meet code is going to vary. So the price per square foot can really skew, and it's often not a great metric. So our 400 square foot ADU in the backyard, within 50 feet of the main house, all on public utilities, is generally going to be cheaper than that ADU that is Mike here, 150 feet in the backyard. Maybe he's on a well or needs another well, a new well. Maybe he's on septic and needs to replace, expand, or in his case, do a bedroom conversion. There's just inherently going to be some costs that can't be avoided. So
Right,
that's where it gets skewed, and that's where it can be a challenge to bring price down, and it's where that metric of price per square foot, you start having apples, oranges, and pears as a comparison. So we're often where we're looking at it is what's our cost foundation up, so that hey, if you have a builder's plan and an architect's plan and our plan, and you want to compare the costs together, let's look foundation up, because we know that base utility, site work, landscaping, etc., is going to be the same for all those, and quotes for those services can vary.
Right, and ultimately where you're saving the money is in having less square footage, really, in the end.
Yeah, there's a couple other ways to spin that too. What is these are high performance, energy efficient houses. If someone's downsizing, spending a chunk of change to build an ADU, and they're on a fixed income, what are your bills going to be? That's going to be the most important. And a very airtight, energy efficient home that's all electric, you should be able to project out and control your bills, and then factor in things like property taxes and stuff like that.
Yeah. Can you go back to the cost slide? We had a couple of people that were wanting to look at that, and
Yes, let's go back.
but
Yeah,
And
and there's
we have
go ahead.
lots of cost questions. That if anyone is interested in our pricing guide, it's hard to give exact prices, not knowing where you live, lots of variables. But if you send an email to Tim, he can send you our pricing guide that kind of gives a general idea.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Go shoot a message to our info account. We're getting 60,000 foot view. The pricing guide tries to give you a sense of, hey, a typical ADU at various sizes, what's it going to cost? And then backyard ADUs, to get even more granular, would come out and do a site visit and a feasibility study to hone in on your property. So we're right here at 6 o'clock. Are there any other questions? I mean, that's what we're here for tonight.
How much is the feasibility study? That's our last question. Oh, there's
Yep.
one more.
So we charge $600 to do that, and it basically covers our time. And the goal there is to, again, get you good information, because there are so many variables here. And having that report, having that site sketch on a piece of paper, can arm you with the information to know, do I want to move forward? What are my next steps? And how to get going from there.
We also
Sometimes
have,
too,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. I was just gonna say, sometimes that next step is, get in touch with a lawyer. We're really lucky to have Mike tonight because he's so knowledgeable. So, here's his contact information, as well as ours.
And I was just plugging the YouTube channel again, that we also have a full feasibility study. If you're like, what is involved with that? What do I get in that? What's included? What questions will be answered? There's a webinar up on our channel for that as well. And our final question is the ADU constructed by Backyard ADUs net zero?
Yeah, we say our ADUs are net zero ready. So it's an all electric home. This house right here, we actually had a great example. They're there in the sunshine. That roof is up. It is ready to have solar panels installed. The insulation, the air sealing, the envelope, were dialed in to be net zero ready. We are net zero ready. We're dialed in to be net zero. You add those solar panels.
And if anyone is more interested in that as well, our energy efficiency, we have an event every April for Earth Month. Our Chief of Operations and Engineering, who's a huge environmentalist, he comes on and goes through all of the energy efficiency things and sustainability that are specific to our homes, and is going to have some guest panelists, and that's April 24th. If you want to mark your calendars, we'll be sending an email about that as well, and you'll see it on our social channels.
That one is going to be a fantastic event, and I mean it when I say it. It's a don't miss one. We're also going to bring in our energy rater. We're required in Massachusetts here to bring in an independent third-party energy rater. They're going to be on the call, give us their lens. How are they thinking about all the specs, mechanical ventilation, air sealing, etc. And then we're going to dive into what's it like to live in an all-electric house, and what does that mean, and getting back to bills and costs. So mark your calendars, April 24th. It's going to be fantastic.
Oh, someone said, we can't go without saying, someone says, what does net zero ready mean?
Yeah. So in an all electric house, we have no gas. So your electric bill is paying for your heating and cooling, lighting, appliances. All of that energy you are using, if you have an energy source like solar panels, you're offsetting, hey, I'm using energy, but I'm generating electricity. And net zero is zeroing out to say you are, basically generating as much energy as you use. That calculation too could get deeper into different layers of, the energy used to build the house and all that stuff. So we can nerd out, and we will on April 24th.
Great. I think that's it. It's a wrap.
Great. Well, thank you, Averill, and thanks to Mike as well, and thanks to you guys for coming tonight and asking your questions. It's a really exciting time here for ADUs in Massachusetts and beyond. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good night, Tim. Bye, everyone.
Bye.